The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Pat Mayo Experience. I'm not Pat Mayo, I'm Garion Thorne. That means we are talking some baseball on this episode of the show. And I am joined, as I have been every single time we've done a baseball preview show, from The Athletic, one Christopher Meaney. Chris, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Yeah, we're into it now. Like spring training has begun. But yeah, it's draft time now. Drafts are happening and it's good to be here again with you.
Yeah, and actually we're going to break down your rankings specifically. We've already covered...
Let's pick them apart.
The top 20.
Yeah.
We did that about a month ago. So our perspectives have changed on some of these players.
Slightly, yeah.
As things have kind of unraveled. And we're actually going to recap a couple guys we already talked about just because their movement within your personal rankings or even within drafts we've been doing.
Yeah.
We're both doing the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational,
Yes.
which was, a fantastic endeavor set up by Justin Mason.
Oh, awesome. I love it.
Who everyone loves, obviously, from the Sleeper and the Bust.
Yes.
It's really a lot of fun, and it's great to see... you check ADP and even really reputable ADP like NFBC, when you're actually doing a draft with like 200 other guys and getting a sense for where they think these players should be going, it's a really interesting take on maybe some things we might be missing.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and with that draft too, like 5 outfielders. I mean, this playing fantasy baseball over the years, it was usually just 3.
Yep.
And when you
maybe
get into
4.
maybe 4 with their utility or whatever. But now we're getting into 5 outfielders, and I'm finding, and I'm sure we'll talk about that draft throughout here today. I'm finding those outfielders they're coming off the board pretty quickly.
Yeah. They are.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of part and parcel. We've also talked about this quite a bit, sort of the lack of stolen bases.
Yes.
I think that there is, if you don't want to be the guy who has to take Billy late or, reaches for Trey Turner in the first round, there's a way to sort of build your team 15 stolen bases at a time through some outfielders. So it is interesting to see how those slots kind of go because, I think we agree that sort of after outfielder 30.
Yeah.
And Puig is rapidly climbing up the board.
Oh, big time.
So he might not even be that like fail-safe guy you can get outside the top 100 anymore.
No.
Actually, I would say he's not.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
It gets a little sketchy after that. But let's start right at the top. There's a pretty good outfielder who leads off your rankings.
Yeah.
Mike Trout comes in at number 1. Mookie Betts is at number 2. JD Martinez at number 3. Max Scherzer, first pitcher, number 4. Christian Yelich, number 5. Jose Ramirez, number 6. Nolan Arenado at 7. Ronald Acuna Jr. at 8. Trevor Story at 9. And Alex Bregman at 10. So let's start with Jose Ramirez because we sort of had a conversation about a month ago where I think we were both starting to get to this place, but we weren't quite there yet.
We were. I definitely wasn't there.
Because he was the 3rd player on average by ADP, but it was a pretty distinct gap. I think everyone knew that coming into this season. We know that Trout's the number 1.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple people convinced themselves that Betts deserves to go number 1, and I guess
And
there's
it's been
an
happening
argument for that.
Sure, absolutely.
But those are the 2 guys.
Yeah.
Then it gets a little dicey. There's arguments to be made about, I would say, 6 or 7 different players that they could be the number 3 overall guy, but Ramirez was about the only one, and I'll still say this, despite the red flags, he's probably the only guy aside from Yelich who I would say could possibly, not that he's going to, but could even possibly be a 5-category elite player.
Yeah.
And that was kind of keeping him in the conversation, despite the fact that second half, 218, just a 427 slugging percentage, a lot of rough stuff.
Yeah.
So that was one of the red flags. And then as we touched on, I think people are starting to realize how bad Cleveland's lineup is going to be. And, it's a lot of negativity right now surrounding Jose Ramirez, but in that Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational, I was picking 4. Thankfully, I didn't have to make this call because the guy going 3rd just took Jose Ramirez. But I was sitting there before the draft started thinking, if he's there at 4, should I take Jose Ramirez? And I was really fighting myself about it. I think I probably would have. But what's your clarification and justification for putting him at 6?
Yeah, a lot of the things that you just talked about, and I agree with you. I think he could be, when you're talking about Trout and Betts, I think he's the next closest guy is a 5-tool player, right? 22 years ago, 30-30. as someone who can hit 30 home runs again and steal the bags and a good average. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not worried about really any of that stuff. Sure, the second half is there and there were some red flags, but I was in the same situation as you. I was picking fourth, and the person in front of me had Jose Ramirez at third, and I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do in this situation? And I just went with JD Martinez. I took the power, I took the pop, I took, he doesn't steal any bases, but other than that,
He's an
I
elite
feel like
4 category player, which is
yeah, I'm more comfortable with him inside that Red Sox lineup. What I know is still going to be very successful, one of the best. And I'm looking at Cleveland, and we talked about this before. You're right. Some guys that have just left that team, like Edwin, Michael Brantley. All of a sudden, Francisco Lindor is questionable to start the season. Now, I don't want to take too much stock into that. Obviously, he's bumped down my rankings slightly.
Yeah.
But with that lineup, the decreased power and just really two legitimate bats in that lineup, I don't know where else. Like, so I'm looking at the numbers here, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe a slight decrease in power, maybe a slight decrease in RBIs,
like 39
maybe
home runs
runs.
is a lot.
39 home runs is a lot, so I don't know if he can get to that number. And I'm sitting here, we're just splitting hairs. Like, I still think he is a phenomenal baseball player, but JD Martinez, even now since we've talked and I've given you my rankings, Arenado has signed with Colorado. I had something in the back of my mind where if things don't work out in the first couple months, maybe he gets traded, maybe he switches teams. Now I'm thinking I like him a little bit more too. So for JD, it's a matter, I think it'll be hard for him to get back to that number where I think, well, JD Martinez will get there, right?
Yeah.
Ramirez may not get back to those exact numbers. I think JD will get there. Scherzer, I've moved up just recently.
He's just so safe.
He's just so safe, and 200 innings, 200 plus strikeouts. Like those are numbers that I think he can get to again. So just the slight decrease in some of what we've seen in the second half, and really we've touched on it. It's that lineup in Cleveland. It's just not going to be the same, and I'm kind of down on everybody inside that offense.
Yeah, I think the argument against Ramirez, sort of like you were really spelling out there, is just there's so much safety in guys around him. And it's weird because, like you, I still think he's someone, I don't think his average is going to crater. I don't think it's going to stay at 220. Like, no, I think he's a 285, 290 hitter.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, you look at even the struggles he had across the second half of the season, he still posted for the entirety of the season career lows in chase rate, in swinging strike rate. Like, he just profiles as a guy who's not ever going to hit below 270 because his contact skills just won't allow it. He plays in a pretty good ballpark. I am concerned, as I was then, about just how fly ball oriented he's become. And even in September, like it's 1 month.
Yeah.
I think that looking at the second half is already splitting hairs. Looking at September is like, okay, maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit. But in September, a 51.3% fly ball rate, just a 24.4% hard contact rate. Essentially, that means he was a pop fly hitter.
Yeah.
That's the last thing you want to be as a hitter. So there's some worry. And just, we know what JD Martinez is going to be because he's been that for 3 years.
Consistently.
We know what Nolan Arenado is going to be. We know what Max Scherzer is going to be.
Yeah.
I've got some questions about Yelich's power, but everything else I don't really worry about. So,
and those were the two I was kind of back and forth with, Yelich and Ramirez. And again, that may just be a matter of if you're playing in a league with 5 outfielders, maybe you lean that way. But I mean, Ramirez, he's fine over Yelich too. Like, he's probably going to have more. He's probably going to hit more home runs. Maybe the stolen bases will be kind of, maybe I could lean Yelich there, but it's very, very close.
They'll be similar.
Very, very
around
similar.
20, yeah.
And Milwaukee's offense is probably better than Cleveland's if I'm looking at the two. So maybe there's some more runs in Yelich and maybe slightly less RBI. So it's tough. It's a preference of what you want to do, right? Yeah. And we talk about after the top 30 outfielders, if you get yourself a Yelich, in the first few picks, and you have to get 5 outfielders, I think that's a plus. Yeah.
No, I think it, like you said, it just comes down to the range of outcomes. Yeah. And he probably has a larger range of outcomes than any of the other players you could get inside the top 5. So I've got no problem with him at 6. I think if push came to shove, I'd probably still take him at 4 or 5.
At 4 or 5, yeah.
But only if Martinez was the guy taking at 3. Because I, like you, had the 4th pick. And I was
fine with that. And I'm seeing JD fall down to like 8 or 9 or 10. It's maybe the average comes down slightly, but he's still, again, that lineup is phenomenal. And that's the argument you can make over bets from Trout is that he's going to score more runs.
And the RBIs too.
The
We
RBIs
talked
as
about that.
well. I mean, he's the Boston lineup 1 through 9 is
really good
pretty
lineup.
good. It's a lot better than the Angels lineup, and Trout's really, for years you go look, and that's the one knock is he just doesn't, nobody's on base for him, and he's getting 80 to 90. It's like, well, he's getting 80 to 90 RBIs, but there's a difference between the two.
Sure. I mean, I think you can just write bets in for 100, which is
absolutely
kind of crazy, but you can. Trevor Story comes in at number 9 for you. We both had very nice things to say about Trevor Story. I was still a little surprised to see him this high in your rankings.
Yeah, he's moved up considerably for me over the past little bit.
And look, I don't want to rehash everything we said, but one of the points that I really liked about Trevor Story, and I think it's really the best thing you can do if you're playing Colorado, as we talked about a bunch, just make contact.
Yeah.
Go out of your way to make contact. And it seems like he's getting to that point. Like his raw contact rate just went up from 70.4% to 77.4%. That's something we love to see.
Absolutely.
Strikeout rate obviously went down because not so much, he's still got a lot of swing and miss in the bat, but he's just swinging earlier and swinging more often, which is not always the best thing to do, but in Colorado specifically, you'll take that every time. I just thought it was interesting because we also talked about how much we both like Alex Bregman, and I feel like that must have been a really hard decision for you. So
it was.
What was your thought process at putting Story at 9 and Bregman at 10, where I feel like most people would probably take Bregman ahead of Story?
Yeah, and I think I'm the highest on Bregman too. Looking around on Fantasy Pros, I'm seeing the difference. I have Bregman as a first round pick and Story as a first round, and we talked about Lindor just briefly there, and we'll get into all these shortstops because that tier is super interesting when we talk about Turner. But for me, with Story and over Bregman, I think it's a matter of there's a little bit more stolen bases, and that's really what it is. I mean, Bregman will get to double digits perhaps, and we talked about their team not running a lot; they don't really need to. But you look at Story, I mean, 27 stolen bases. Other than that, they're right on par. Bregman scores a few more runs.
Yeah,
the power I think is going to increase with Bregman. I think he can improve and get better. I think he's the best hitter of this tier, in fact.
I guess that's an interesting question. Do you think Trevor Story will ever be better than he was last season? Because I think last season might be the season we look at and go, that was the best he was ever in his career.
Sure. I don't think he can get to 40 home runs or 37. Maybe he can flirt with that number again. But I think that is what we saw from him. And I'm looking at 88 runs, 37 home runs, 108 RBIs, 27 stolen bases, 290. Maybe he's not 290. Maybe he's 270, 275.
Yeah, probably.
On base percentage, 348. So across the board, I see the things that you just mentioned. The strikeout percentage, 34 to 25, slugging 5th overall, ISO 7th overall, crushes lefties, can hit lefties. That's huge.
Yeah.
Can hit on the road. That's huge. 276 average on the road is huge. And then the WOBA against lefties, 442 is top 3 in baseball. So he can hit lefties. He can hit on the road. He's in Colorado half the time. The lineup is still legit. And I like the stolen bases. So I just think that when I look at his line and I look at everybody else's lines in terms of this tier, Story, I think, can get right back there.
Yeah. I mean, look, if he hits the bat, Derek Carty's projection system has these guys almost identical. It's
they're all
crazy.
very, very close.
Bregman, he has really the main difference. Bregman, he has hitting 285, and I could see Bregman being a 300
So
hitter.
I think he's the best hitter of the bunch.
Yeah. Story, he has it 268, which I think is fair. I don't think Trevor Story, there still is a lot of strikeouts with Trevor Story. So he's probably a 270 hitter. But like you mentioned, the stolen base differential is big because Bregman's probably going to top out at 10. And even then, we have concerns about, we expressed this prior, Altuve's ability to steal bases in an offense where you're already so station to station so consistently, like you don't necessarily
I think Springer could steal more bases if he was given the green light, and he just
doesn't seem like there is a green light in Houston. So that's probably a concern. Story, I think the only thing I'm concerned about is like there's a little scared or a fear for me of maybe this being like the Manny Machado season, where I think it was like 3 years back now. Although he did steal some bases last year, but he had that 20 stolen base season, and everyone was like, okay, cool, this is Machado now. He's going to run. And then he didn't steal a single base the next season. We know Story can do this, but it was a pretty big jump. I think it was 9 to 27. So do we think that maybe it was an aberration, or are you trusting that he's just set in stone 20 stolen bases?
I'm trusting. That's what I'm counting on. As somebody who ran a lot throughout his minor league career, and then somebody who, when you're talking about, that year, is somebody who struck out a ton and really didn't get on base as much. So I'm thinking he improved at the plate with some of his batting skills, and I think he's more comfortable. I'm believing in I think 268 is fair, like the projection, but I think he's more of a 275, 280 hitter. I really do believe that. And obviously Colorado does help him. So, and they're side by side. So it was, and you're right. I mean, you know me pretty well. And I was flipping back and forth between these two guys. And 3 weeks ago, before the calf injury popped up, it was Lindor, knowing that 129 runs.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be able to get there. So I see a decrease in Lindor across the board. I see Machado. We'll get into him in a little bit. A decrease, I mean, probably in runs, even though he only had 82 last year. That's a number he probably maybe just gets to. He's not going to get to 100 runs in San Diego. So I'm looking at Bregman being a better hitter, but I think Story has more power, more upside, a higher ceiling, and the stolen bases I believe in.
I wouldn't be shocked if Trevor Story was shortstop number 1 at the end of the season. And I think he definitely has that upside because of Colorado and probably a lot of the rankings. Like right now, NFBC ADP 18.5.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is just probably fear. Because he is, again, there's a lot of different outcomes that could happen with Trevor Story, but I'm with you. Like he has the talent to be the best guy.
He went 10th in my draft.
Yeah, I saw
it was that little tier. It was, you know, they want those shortstops. That first tier it's amazing. It's an amazing tier. And you can wait on shortstop. There's a nice second tier as well with upside guys and Seager and Carrera and Xander. Like that's an amazing tier as well. And then later on there's one. But it went Story, Bregman, and then I think Baez was early on, and he's kind of starting to fall down a little bit too. But I believe in him as well. Like,
yeah, I do too.
I think his average can come down slightly, but I think he's a phenomenal hitter. If he can get away from chasing that pitch in the opposite box, you know, he'll be fine. But is another guy who maybe his numbers come down slightly, but somebody else who can bring some power and some speed.
Yeah, a lot of 30 home run, 20 stolen base potential in this tier. And you've got Baez at 22. Before that, you have Francisco Lindor, the aforementioned Lindor at number 11, Jacob deGrom at number 12, Jose Altuve at 13, Chris Sale at 14, Bryce Harper at 15, Aaron Judge at 16, Freddie Freeman, Paul Goldschmidt, Charlie Blackmon, Giancarlo Stanton. A lot of very familiar names in that tier. Really starts to get interesting at 21. That's where Machado comes in. We finally have a team for Machado, so we can have that conversation. Javi Baez, Trey Turner, Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole at 25, Andrew Benintendi at number 26, Rizzo at 27, Juan Soto at 28, Whit Merrifield at 29, and Chris Bryant comes in to round out your top 30. Machado, it's just interesting to me that I think initially there was a lot of like, oh man, this is the worst place he could have signed, Petco. Yeah. And I get it. Petco's not but it's not terrible.
It's not awful, actually.
They moved the fences in a couple years ago.
They continue to move them in.
It's played as sort of like a league average park. It's better for left-handed batters than it is for right-handed batters.
Yes.
Unless you're Bartolo Colon. And I get that it wasn't the ideal spot.
Yeah.
Let's say he signs in like St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Do you still have him at 21 or is the 21 a reflection of Petco a little bit?
It's a reflection a little bit. Also the lineup slightly. Yeah. You know, you look at these guys and their rankings last year and just straight 5x5. I mean, Lindor 7, Machado 11, Story 12, Bregman 14, Baez 16, and Turner 25. We'll get to Turner in a little bit. I am a little low on Machado. Again, I think it's just... I'll reference that again with the outfielders and some of what I feel after the top 30. It gets a little slim pickings for me, but you know, with Machado, looking at some of his numbers, I do feel like he did benefit a little bit from playing in Baltimore and the AL East.
Well, I mean, his numbers in 2018, I will say it wasn't always like this. Like he wasn't necessarily someone who in, 2014, 2015, 2016.
We're just waiting for him to break out at that point.
But he never really had the massive home road splits. Mm-hmm. But in 2018, before he got traded, they were really apparent. So I don't know how to make too much of it, but a 331 ISO and a 471 WOBA at Camden in just over 200 plate appearances last season. Wasn't nearly as good in Dodger Stadium or anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's fair. That's fair.
You know, I feel like what we got from him last year, he could probably duplicate that. 84 runs. Like I said, I don't think he's a 100-run guy in San Diego. There's some question marks of the guys behind him. I have some question marks.
Could it really be worse than Baltimore, though, for, 90 games?
Yeah, 90. And even in LA, he was. I thought he was actually fine in LA.
People seem to think he was really bad in LA.
No, he was fine.
He had like a 121 WRC. Like he wasn't great. He wasn't like the elite player he could be. But I think that speaks to almost his floor, which is just, yeah, if you ask people how he did in LA because they didn't win the World Series and because he wasn't great in the playoffs themselves, people would say he did poorly. But, you know, I think he hit like 13 home runs.
He was fine.
Months. Like, it was fine.
Yeah, in fact, if you were a Machado owner, you're probably satisfied with the move anyways to go to a better ball team. But no, I don't think it'd be much different than Baltimore, and answer your question. But I mean, 84 runs is that's what I'm saying. I think he can get back to some of his numbers, maybe a slight decrease in home runs and perhaps RBIs. Those are hard to predict anyways. But again, San Diego's, some of the guys behind him, there are some question marks there.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about Renfroe and a guy that strikes out a lot, maybe can put it all together this season. Hosmer is a guy, you know.
I think this really helps Hosmer, though.
It should, because somebody's going to get on base for him.
Yeah.
And then there's Will Myers behind him, who's never been able to really, over the past couple of years, put together a full season. So some question marks with their lineup. You mentioned the ballpark. It's not awful. They continue to move the fence in. I was reading from somebody, the fences in. I was reading, I forget who it was, a Padres beat reporter, talking about how when they built the scoreboard and left it, you know, it helps with some of the wind that was coming into home plate. Just little things that people are talking about. It's not that bad. And I agree, it isn't that bad. But for me and Machado, I just think there's more upside with some of the outfielders that you mentioned before. We still don't have a home for Bryce Harper, but Aaron Judge is somebody that I think has more power in his bat, and somebody I think can get to 40 home runs.
Stanton too.
Stanton as well. You know,
because
an
if we
off-season in New York.
If we are like questioning, you know, his viability as a stolen base threat, like he was 14 for 16 last season. Again, that's not going to blow anybody away.
No,
it's nice to get around 15
it is nice.
steals, but I don't think if he was the poster child for the guy, I was like, hey, stolen base, you know, ups and downs. Like, obviously, you can't trust Manny Machado to ever be a stolen base threat. So if he's just going to be a 4-category player, I'm obviously taking Aaron Judge or Giancarlo Stanton because they're better in those 4 categories.
Exactly. That's the difference for me with those two. Like, you're right. The stolen bases are nice, and I think he can get to 15. He could probably, again, with some of these guys, you're talking about Springer and someone on Houston, like he could probably steal 20 if he wanted to.
Yeah.
If he really wanted to, he could. We've already seen it before. I mean, 1 year it's 0, doesn't even try to steal.
Yeah.
And then another year it's 20. So, I mean, he can get there. It's just the reason I have those outfielders. I just feel like there's more upside in some of them. The average probably won't be as nice. There's a slight chance. You know, those guys are 270. I think Judge can get up to the 280, but Stanton may be a 270. Maybe he's a 260. Who really knows with that guy? But the power, I want some of those power bats in those spots. I
think that's fair. And the one thing about Machado, it's interesting because it could be equally seen as a positive or a negative, depending on your perspective. Because I guess at some point he's due to get hurt, but does have the most plate appearances of any player in baseball since the start of 2015, over 2,800. So I think it was our buddy Vlad Sedler put this out on Twitter a little while ago that said, like, the most underrated stat in fantasy baseball right now is just plate appearances. Yeah. Like, you need guys to get to the plate to get that volume. And Machado at least seems like he's someone you can kind of pencil in for 160 games a season. Yeah.
Which is nice because there was, like you said, with the knee injuries over the, you know, it was a 2-year span.
Yeah.
There were some concerns.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But he's been very, very durable. And I think specifically of the guys behind him, you mentioned Myers, obviously it helps him. You know, they have ways of making that offense actually pretty good. Like, they've got a ton of prospects on the horizon. Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked if this is a really good offensive team next year.
Yeah, I agree.
This year might be a little dicey.
Yeah, we probably would have seen Tatis Jr. last year if he didn't hurt himself. Yeah. There were some rumblings that he would have been called up at least in September. We'll definitely see him this year and probably early.
Yeah, and like Luis Urias is a good player too. Like, there's a lot of possible very good offensive pieces on this team. But I think Hosmer is interesting just because I've always hated Eric Hosmer.
And you've never been a Hosmer
Never been a Hosmer fan, but his value's fallen so far. And we've talked about how we don't really love first base beyond, like, you know, there's obviously the Goldschmidt Freeman tier that I would love to try to exploit. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
You know, Jose Abreu is a guy I think is going to have a nice bounce back season. But after that, there's a lot of question marks at first base. I just think Hosmer, who is also just super durable. Say whatever you want about Eric Hosmer.
Oh, for sure.
Always plays. So if you've got him and Machado in the lineup every single day, I think just through sheer normalization and volume, it's going to help Hosmer.
And there's nothing wrong with these guys. And it was so tough to put together these overalls because I love that tier of shortstop. And I'm sitting there, and it's all about preference for you. And for me, I mean, I'm I would rather take that shot on the first baseman in Goldschmidt and Freeman. I want one of those guys. And then I want to have a solid couple outfielders. And those guys we're talking about really actually don't bring any speed, which is tough. It's like, that's why I think that those shortstops are going ahead of these outfielders, because they're more 5 category guys, where these outfielders, not so much. But again, you get into the other tier of shortstops, and they have a ceiling that they could finish in the top 5 at the position. And then you get into like Anders and DeYoung, we talked about before, Polanco. It's another guy who's going super, super late, who could be not a 5 category guy, but someone who could steal 20 bags, score 100 runs, and hit 10 to 15 home runs maybe in Minnesota. So
Elvis Andrus, though, as you bring up, is a really weird case this season.
Yeah, like he didn't steal any bags last year, but I think he broke his elbow, and maybe he's not running. Like, this is somebody who averaged about 20 stolen bases. I think I don't quote me on that, but I think it was about 20 previous 6 or 7 years at least. So there's some value to be had at that shortstop position. And that's why I think that I'd rather just take the first baseman or the outfielder ahead of some of these guys.
No, I agree. And I think the poster child for this, thought process of maybe overvaluing the potential of a 5 category player is Trey Turner. Now, you have Trey Turner at 23.
Yeah, this is the lowest, I'm sure.
Which, I would think is probably the lowest. His NFBC ADP is inside the top 10. He's going at 9.5. Sort of like I said off the top, it's weird for me because one half of me really agrees with you. Like, I don't really like drafting Trey Turner. I prefer, taking a guy who I just trust is one of the best players in baseball. There's sort of a weird, and this might just be my own mental inefficiencies, but when you look at your roster after you draft and you're like, oh, where's my first overall pick? Where did he go?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it was Trey Turner. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm looking for like Nolan Arenado or something. It's Trey Turner. Great. But it's not like he was a disappointment last season.
He wasn't. I
think like a lot of people thought he was going to be a bust.
Right.
And he didn't finish as a top 5 guy.
No.
But he was everything you needed him to be. He stole 43 bases. He scored 103 runs.
Yeah. He had some home runs.
And I think the interesting thing, just kind of to link him to Machado and even to link him to Lindor, is he played in all 162 games, had 740 plate appearances, which is the most of anyone in the National League. Only Lindor had more. But you kind of look at it again as much as that's a positive when I'm talking about Machado, and it is, Lindor is a very clear example of, if you're someone who has to rely on volume, which I think Lindor is just a more skilled player than Trey Turner, obviously.
I agree.
He's probably not going to steal 50 bases. And I think Dave Martinez earlier this week, there was a report that he went to Trey Turner and was like, hey, maybe you're stealing more bases this year, which is cool. Like maybe he hits 60, who knows? Because that was the pace he had in his rookie season.
Yeah.
But I just think Lindor is like a better player. So I think like the home runs, the RBI, batting average, what have you, I think Lindor's got the advantage there. But we saw just a random injury crop up with Francisco Lindor. And it was lucky it happened that early on in spring training, because if that happens in March, now he's missing like a month.
Yeah.
And now the guy who led baseball in plate appearances, and that's a nagging injury too. So now the guy who led baseball in plate appearances isn't going to lead baseball in plate appearances. When you're Lindor, I'm not that concerned because, again, I think he's super skilled. But, man, if Trey Turner misses 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and now we're talking about someone who only gets to like 640 plate appearances, I don't know if he's skilled enough to bring back value. So it's hard to really tie your boat to a guy who needs to stay healthy all season long.
Yeah.
And again, we're splitting hairs. Like he's going to steal 50 bases. That's valuable.
For sure.
But I'm kind of with you. I don't know if I put him this low, but I'm with you.
It is pretty low, I will say that. And, on average, he was taken in some drafts 3rd overall last year.
Yeah.
3rd, 4th, 5th. And you mentioned Vlad, and I respect him a ton. And I saw him and he tweeted out, I think yesterday or the day before, talking about in a big money league, he may just take Turner again at 3rd. And I think it's because some of the reasons that you just talked about, like the plate appearances, some safety there with him, filling out across the board. We know how rare stolen bases are. At the same time, I know how much that they pop up throughout the waiver wire throughout the season. They really do. Like, it's just talking about Malik Smith as somebody who wasn't taken last year's, and somebody who's going in the eighth, ninth round now, is purely just kind of stolen bases, even though we don't believe in 300 average. My thing with Turner is, compared to some of these other guys, again, like Lindor, Machado, Story, Bregman, Baez, all finished ahead of Turner last year in rankings. And if you want to include on base percentage, Turner had the 2nd most runs. And I feel like that could come down slightly, right? We already know Bryce Harper's not going to be there.
That lineup's
Soto's
not
going
as
to be a
good, yeah.
stud. We don't know about him. We're really relying on Zimmerman to have a
there's
bounce
like
back. There's some
that top three
the top-
is all right.
The top 3 is fine for sure.
Is Eaton going to be healthy? There's like a lot of
Rendon is nice.
questions. Yeah,
There's
Rendon's
some
easily their
question
best
marks.
player.
Absolutely.
And then there's a
I
lot of
think
questions.
slightly the runs. I don't think he's going to have more power. Maybe
No, that seems like it's
maybe
the
over
max.
a couple of years he could get to mid-20s. RBI is 73. So home runs 6 out of that tier. RBI 6 out of that tier. Stolen base obviously first. Average 6 out of that tier. On base percentage 5th of that tier. So out of all of those guys, I'm
He's
getting
the worst
more
player.
power.
Yeah.
I'm getting more RBIs. I'm getting a similar average. I already talked about Baez. Maybe he's not a 290 hitter. He hit 270 twice already.
Yeah.
So he's going to be right around that average. Story, I already talked about the average. Machado's a better hitter.
I think that's the thing, though. I think if we look back in 6 months and go, how did we get Trey Turner wrong? I think the only way that happens is, one, he steals 80 bases,
Yeah.
which I don't think is really that possible.
Yeah.
It could happen, but you never know. It's been a while.
I max him out at 50.
It's been a long time
but
since we've
50 's
seen
a
someone
lot.
steal 80 bases.
Yes.
I think the other more plausible direction this could go is just suddenly Trey Turner hits 310. And now he's an elite 3 category player in one of those categories. Actually, 2 of those categories. His
Yeah.
batting average is
Because
really
batting average is...
that's a hard one to find.
If he could hit... yeah.
So if he's like a top 5 player or even a top 3 player in batting average and stolen bases, just because they're so rare, that's how this goes wrong. But I'm with you. When you line him up against players who are just frankly better than he is.
That's the thing.
There's a reason every name on that list is an all-star.
Yeah.
Trey Turner's not. And it's weird to take a guy who's not better than a player in real life ahead of him in fantasy. I get why you would do it.
Yeah.
And again, I probably look, if I'm sitting there in a 12-team league, I think the perfect time to get Trey Turner for me, and I don't know if this would happen a lot because again, his ADP is inside the top 10.
Yeah.
But if I'm picking like 11th or 12th, and I can take him as the guy I get 13th or 14th, so I can pair him with like an elite player, I think I feel a lot safer.
For sure. And that's kind of where and again, you mentioned he wasn't a bust. If you took him 3rd overall and he finished his 15th, it's like, okay, he's not really a bust. But at the same time, you didn't get that power.
Yeah.
Like, again, I'm talking to some of these other guys that are going that early. I'm getting double the amount of home runs. I'm getting another 30 to 40 RBIs. I don't think he's a 310 hitter. I think he's the same in terms of average as the other guys. You're getting more stolen bases, and I don't want to compare the two too much here and get crazy. And I have Whit Merrifield a little earlier too, but look at the last 2 years from these guys.
Merrifield's he's been
Merrifield,
better.
31 home runs, Turner 30. Whit, 168 runs, Turner 178. Now, of course, the first year of the rookie season didn't play as much. 138 RBIs for Merrifield, 118 for Turner, 79 stolen bases for Merrifield, 89 for Turner, and the average 276 to 296, and the on-base percentage is very similar. And Whit Merrifield is a guy who's going 3 rounds later than him. Into the 4th. I know they're not the same and the ceiling is higher with Turner.
And that's the thing. It's just we're still attributing this ceiling to Turner, which I'm with you. I don't think he's a 310 hitter either.
Yeah.
I just think that's the way this could possibly go wrong. But
I just don't want to get too crazy about picking him because of stolen bases. Like,
that's
because there's
fair.
some guys that you can get a little bit later on.
That's fair. Again, I think though it's all about strategy. Like you said, it's all about preference, especially in these first couple rounds. But if you can get him and then pair him with him up with Aaron Judge or Bryce Harper,
you're on your way.
Then you've got all 5 categories covered. Like I think that's a really good start. And I know some people, especially in doing the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational, a lot of people seem to really want to get like a stud pitcher in the first 2 rounds.
Yes.
I've been very comfortable grabbing one of the guys in the 3rd round, like one of your Snells or your Bowers or something like that. We'll get into that a little bit later. But let's get to the rest of your rankings. At number 31, you have Corey Kluber. At number 32, Aaron Nola. Again, that tier we were just talking about. Carlos Carrasco at number 33. Chris Davis at 34. Rhys Hoskins, 35. Starling Marte, 36. George Springer at 37. Cody Bellinger, 38. Eugenio Suarez, 39. And Blake Snell at number 40. We're actually going to do your pitching rankings separately. So we'll get into some of those pitchers a little bit later on a different video. Let's talk about Eugenio Suarez, just because I really like where you have him. I think people have been like underrating him a little bit. His, you've got him at 39. NFBC ADP is 53.6. So it's not like it's crazy. It's about a round higher than where he should be going according to the consensus. But coming off a phenomenal season, someone who has really demonstrated sort of like Trevor's story, just better contact skills as the seasons have gone along. He's someone who has very good plate discipline. It's almost like
Yes.
he's studied at the Tao of Joey Votto.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm sort of two things, I guess. The second half got a little hairy.
Yeah.
And I just think where you have him at 39 and then, to have Rendon at 41, I just think I'd rather have Rendon.
Yeah.
I just think I trust Rendon more than I trust Suarez. But
think that's
that being
fair.
said, I still have those guys in the same tier.
Yeah.
So I think you have them in the right spot. I just would maybe invert that a little bit.
Yeah.
But what was the decision-making process between those two guys?
Very similar. Obviously, a couple spots apart. And Rendon he's a better hitter. He's going to have a better average. But I think actually there's just slightly more upside and power with Suarez.
I mean, Cincinnati probably has a better. You could convince me Cincinnati has a better lineup.
Yeah.
Actually, it wouldn't take a lot.
Yeah.
So-
No. And obviously, we know about the ballpark being significant as well as somebody else who's crushed lefties over the last little bit, and as somebody I didn't really buy into. I was into that. Very underrated.
Mm-hmm.
But over the past 3 years now, even 4. Increase in power every single year.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting into age 27 here now, where I think he can,
Which is nuts. He feels like someone who should be
Right?
32.
And I feel like he can even improve. I mean, 34 home runs, 104 RBIs. I actually think he can get up near 35 and plus. I do, and it's a better lineup. They brought in a couple more guys who can improve that lineup. Maybe he's not a 280 hitter. Maybe he's a 270 guy, but. Look at some of the batted ball profiles over the past couple of years. It's it's all stayed the course. It's all very similar. In fact, it's the exact same in the last 2 years. Line drive percentage 24, fly ball percentage 37, hard hit increased from 33 to 48. The home run to fly ball ratio increased a little bit as well, but just somebody I just feel has been consistent over the past couple of years and has only missed 28 games over the last 3 years too. I feel like is underrated. And last year, look at some of those numbers. He missed about 20 games with a thumb injury. So maybe he could have gotten
National League in RBI, I think.
36, 37 home runs. So, and again, somebody you don't really need to take in the 4th round.
No.
Because I feel like,
But I think some people are starting to get on
him.
him a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But maybe a round later, doesn't get the credit that I think he deserves.
Yeah, I think if you can take him in the mid 40s, you're winning. I think it's perfect. I just I would have
Arenado slightly.
There's just a safety with Rendon where I think
Or
like
Rendon,
you go
rather,
through the last 2 seasons, he's hit 305, 7th best average in baseball. He's got 192 RBIs, 12th best in baseball. 140 WRC plus, the 15th best in baseball. It's better than Chris Bryant, better than Nolan Arenado, better than Anthony Rizzo.
He is
I just think he's underrated.
Yeah.
I think people are still kind of like not quite understanding that Anthony Rendon is the best player on the Nationals
I think
right now.
Rendon and Turner, and I look at third base, I feel like both of those guys don't get the respect. Like, I think they're good targets.
Well, actually, we'll talk about Justin Turner in a second.
Yeah,
I found
like
a very
Turner.
interesting comparable for Justin Turner. But yeah, I think with Suarez, I mentioned the second half, and you talked about the batting average. I'm with you. I think his batted ball profile is fantastic. He is someone who, like you said, profiles, especially in that ballpark, to hit 30 to 35 home runs, maybe even 40 if he runs into a couple lucky ones. Yeah. And even where his contact rate is not super high, it's at that Trevor Story level, 77.1%. The O contact rate is what really plummets that, which is not terrible because he's not someone who chases a whole lot. Like his outside the zone contact rate is 56.6%, but he only swings
he improved
25% of the time, and it's getting better.
Yeah.
Where his zone contact rate is up around 88%.
Yeah.
So he hits the pitches he has to hit. And he hits them hard.
Yeah.
48% hard contact rate. So I like him a lot. It's just that second half, all of a sudden the strikeout rate, first half 19.5%, goes up to 28.7%.
Mm-hmm.
By the advanced metrics, was like a league average hitter in the second half.
Yeah.
Could have been a little bit to do with the injury.
Sure.
So maybe you can kind of, put that to the side a little bit. But you'd like, if we have aspirations of him as a 280 hitter, he needs to be closer to the 20% than the 30%.
Yeah, I think he's more of a 270. I don't want to go down as low as 260, but I think he's 280 is. I would be surprised if he hit 280.
Yeah, but again, I think he's a top 50 player.
Yeah. So
I think where you have him is fine. I just would have Rendon ahead of him. Last guy I wanted to talk about inside the top 50. Then we'll talk about some guys who didn't make the top 50.
Yeah.
So Rendon, the aforementioned Rendon, comes in at 41. Trevor Bauer at 42. Walker Buehler at 43. Luis Severino 44. Albies 45. Joey Votto 46. Matt Carpenter 47. Xander Bogaerts 48. Yasiel Puig 49. And Carlos Correa at 50.
And Puig's high because like Tommy Pham.
Look, man, that's where he's going.
I know. And it's crazy because like a month ago, if you were doing a draft, he was like in the 80s and 90s.
50 picks later.
100.
It's nuts.
Like,
But look,
I've seen him
that's
100.
where he's going right now, though. So.
And I know we're not going to get too much into Puig, and then I'm seeing, roster resource, maybe having him in the 6th or 7th spot in the lineup. It's like, I feel like he can.
I think he'll bat higher.
I think that he'll play himself into batting higher. He's a good hitter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in and around that range, like, again, you didn't even mention Pham. Ozuna I like a lot, as well as some guys that I feel like should be in that top 50 that aren't.
Well, you can only fit 50 in there, and there's
you
some
can
good
only get 'em in
players. And one of those guys who you kind of fit in because his ADP a little bit lower, NFBC ADP of 71, is Matt Carpenter.
Yeah.
And I think Carpenter's just a really interesting case study because
Yes.
we saw for 6 weeks last season he was the best player.
Yeah.
in
And then the
baseball.
first 6 weeks, he was like the worst.
And the last 6 weeks he wasn't great either.
No, it was like bookend.
But still, we talked about that batted ball profile for Eugenio Suarez. Matt Carpenter, 49% hard hit rate, best in baseball.
Yeah.
48.3% pull rate, 8th best in baseball.
Yeah.
That's a very simple equation for dings.
Yeah.
So I don't question the power at all. I don't question, and we're talking standard 5x5 too. So if this is an OBP league,
If it's an OBP league, I may even have him
might even
higher.
higher, yeah.
Yeah. His walk rate with 15% is like the 8th best in baseball.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I think we've now reached a point where we just there was a lot of question the last 3 years about what version of Matt Carpenter was going to show up on any given season, because we've seen hits 300 Matt Carpenter with 10 home runs. We've seen 30 home run Matt Carpenter who hits 250. I think the latter is where we are now. He's a 250 hitter.
Yeah.
But his OBP is going to be 370.
Yeah.
So if you play in a league that accounts for that, great,
Boost.
because he's
Yeah.
great. But 20 home runs July and August, and then in September slashes 170, 313, 245 with an ISO below 100.
Yeah, it was rough.
So that's the thing. It's like, what's the middle ground with Matt Carpenter? I guess we're still kind of left wondering, like, but you feel like by the end of the season, it's probably just 255, 30 home runs,
And 100 runs.
100 runs.
Yeah.
85 RBI. Like,
Yeah.
that's what we're getting.
Yeah.
There's a safety in that.
There is a little bit of safety. I know it's those 2 months where he's amazing. He's not that good. And then the month at the start of the season and at the end of the season, he's not that bad. So it is tough to figure out where, and you're looking at career high, 36 home runs, 111 runs, slugging 523, ISO 266 at age 33. There's some red flags and some question marks. You really got to kind of look into the numbers. And, for a guy who, for his fly ball percentage for his career, 40, and you look at the last 2 years, we're talking about Ramirez trying to hit fly balls, and you wonder if that's a question mark. It's 46 and then 50%. Like,
he was one of the first guys
Wow.
to really embrace the launch angle aspect of baseball.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's like you don't want to go down that rate, and you wonder if they're going to strike out a lot more. But really, some of the numbers have kind of just stayed the course. And I'm looking at somebody who you can plot in at first, second, and third. I don't want to get too crazy about the eligibility, but that's nice to have the triple eligibility, is especially weekly lineups if you're in a tough
can
spot.
Get the second base eligibility.
Yeah.
It kind of comes and goes in some leagues.
In some leagues, it's different.
Yahoo's very generous.
Yahoo will give it to
you'll get
anybody.
it there.
Yeah.
But to have the middle infielder possibility with Carpenter,
is super nice, and I like that lineup. Again, Ozuna is somebody that got better in the second half. Shoulder injury slowed him down. You bring in Paul Goldschmidt. You put Carpenter at top of the lineup.
You like
He's just a
DeYoung
lock
too,
for 100 runs. I love DeYoung at the 2 spot. 202 runs last couple of years is the 11th best in baseball, and you just know what you're going to get. Like you mentioned it, 250, 260 maybe, 30 home runs. I think he can get right back there. 100 runs, good lineup. 80 RBIs from a leadoff guy is not bad at all. So
and
maybe
like
slightly early, but just I think there's some consistency.
Well, to that point,
there.
though, we talk about this all the time. Is like, just because someone's in that spot in your rankings doesn't mean you're suggesting they take that person there. Like, you can take him in the 5th round. That's kind of what this thing is. It's just like, there are so many people that drafters will be reaching on this season because they want to be the first person to own X player, or they want to be the guy who's right about Juan Soto again, or whoever it is. Doesn't matter. Carpenter, he's a boring veteran. You just know what you're going to get from this guy. Maybe he's a better roto player than he is like a head-to-head
we talked about this
player,
before with like Jose Abreu in your draft.
Yeah.
Like some of these guys that don't have, like, you ask the average person, like, who do you want, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Matt Carpenter? It's like,
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because Vladimir Guerrero Jr. didn't make your top 50. His NFBC ADP, 40.9. So he's entrenched in a lot of people's top 50s. I've seen him go as high as like 30th. I've seen him go, as late as like 45, but it seems like people grab him in the 3rd or 4th round.
He's definitely going before the 5th.
So let's just kind of do the timeline here, because we've, there's a player we do this for every single season. Everyone's used to it, but so when can the Jays call him up and he gets the extra year of eligibility? It'll be 3 weeks into the season.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe just with the randomness, they play in a dome, so that helps. But, you know, it seems like every team gets a couple rainouts or snowouts early in the season. So maybe he misses ideally like 12 games.
Yeah.
But it's probably more than likely that, like the Braves last season with Acuna, they don't call him up right as he's eligible. It's probably going to be a couple weeks into that. But it's you know, I don't have to rehash the crazy minor league numbers. We all know it. It's fine. But just to have a profile system, kind of talk about what his stat line could look like. So the bat, again, Derek Carty's projection system has him as a 297 hitter, which would actually be like the 6th best projected batting average in all of baseball. But after that, 20 home runs, 76 runs scored, 72 RBIs, and he has him at 581 plate appearances. So if you're talking about the counting stats being a little low and saying like, okay, but what if it's at 650? He's not getting a 650. 581 is actually pretty generous. Yeah, I would think. When you look at that profile system specifically and kind of go hunting for like, okay, who has similar stat lines? And it's funny because I wasn't even necessarily looking to put guys at the same position. But Justin Turner and Daniel Murphy are easily going to surpass that. Yeah. Maybe they don't hit 300, but maybe they do. Yep. Justin Turner and Daniel Murphy could definitely hit 300.
Those are two guys that I think could hit 300 for sure.
And when we talk about boring veteran players, like you can get Justin Turner 6-7 rounds after Vladimir Guerrero. I'm a Jays fan. I want this more than anything. But at the same time, you stare at this like we don't think there's going to be a single adjustment period for Vladdy. Like he's 20 years old.
I know. And he's getting so much respect and he should. And I'm not a Jays guy, but I'm like his dad.
You're a Vladdy guy. Though.
I'm a Vladdy guy. I watched his dad play live several times, and you know I believe all the scouts and even Guerrero himself saying that his son is going to be a better hitter than him. You know, a free swinger, perhaps slightly like his dad, but
low strikeout rates though.
But a guy who maybe not necessarily is going to hit 40 home runs consistently throughout his career, but is going to be a 300 hitter, can hit to all different, spray it all over the ballpark. He's terrific bat skills, but you're right. If you look at those numbers, and Turner is somebody that I have in my queue in every single draft as. You just mentioned the numbers. Those are numbers. And I have Guerrero here down here too with my projections 20, 75, 80. I give him 80 RBIs. Yeah. I give him a 290 average. Maybe he steals 5 bases.
Basically
that's Turner.
Basically. And that's the thing too. Like we look at, you know, people are going to obviously compare him to Acuna because it's the former number 1 prospect 1 year to the next one.
Yeah.
The difference with Acuna is he has the potential to be a 5 category contributor, not getting any steals. Right. I mean, look, he's a big boy.
Yeah, he is.
He can run. He's athletic.
Yeah, we've already seen him in the spring.
Probably not going to steal. Yeah. Apparently, he cratered home plate.
He did.
But yeah, like look, Daniel Murphy's someone who's caught a lot of helium. The Colorado thing, I think everyone realized it simultaneously. He's moved up, but
since we've talked about him,
people haven't made that move yet with Justin Turner. If you want what Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s, I don't want to say floor because look, he could. That's almost implying that he's definitely going to be better than the stat line, and I think it's a pretty accurate stat line. If you want that line,
you just
take Justin Turner.
Exactly. That's my thing there. And even with Carpenter, like you're not going to get the average, but you're going to get more home runs. You're going to get more home runs. You're definitely going to get more runs.
More runs.
RBIs are probably going to be similar. Like you're paying premium for that line, and maybe even more. Maybe even a little bit more. Like a third rounder like that.
It's a lot.
You're looking at. We're talking about Suarez going a little bit later than him as somebody who's probably not going to have the average. And
yeah, I mean, that comes down to like some of those guys is like, do you want a guy who probably is going to hit 300? Like, do you need average? I can understand it. But yeah, if you're talking RBIs, runs, home runs, and again, we can kind of just put steals off to the side. Yeah, Suarez, Turner.
I think there's going to be a slight
Murphy.
adjustment period for him. I really do. Like, I know he's crushed every single level that he's been at, but I don't want to say that he's going to be a 300 hitter right away. Like it's giving him a little bit too much credit. I mean that lineup as well. It's not fantastic.
It's hard when that's your defining skill.
Yeah.
Because again, like you go back to even like Chris Bryant, it was, he was like a borderline 2nd round pick the year he came out, even though we knew he was going to miss 15, 16 games off the hop. Mm-hmm. But Bryant at least had I mean, the note on Bryant was this guy has generational power. Like he could still hit 40 home runs.
Yeah.
Guerrero, like, again, he could be the best hitter in baseball in 3 years.
Yeah.
But, even his batted ball profile, you look through the minor leagues and, this stuff can change. Again, he's 20 years old.
Yeah.
But, he's been kind of prone to being a ground ball hitter. Now, some of that is like his fly ball rates have generally been low. Some of that's tied into the fact that he's such a line drive heavy hitter that kind of pulls away from the fly ball, sort of like Nick Castellanos. We've seen that a couple seasons, or even Freddie Freeman is sort of a similar hitter. But that's the thing, like Vladdy could be Freddie Freeman, but it's hard to be like, hey, this 20-year-old rookie who's going to miss maybe the first month of the season when his best category is batting average.
Yeah.
That's such an up and down luck based kind of category skill set that it's a lot of value to put on a guy who we just haven't seen yet.
Yeah, it's a steep price, and I'll be rooting for him. Obviously.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
I can't wait till he comes up. I'm sure you're gonna be at the game, his first game. I'm gonna try to be there as well.
It'll probably only be like $10 to get into that.
Yeah,
game, so it won't be that bad.
But it's a steep price to pay for sure for somebody we haven't seen yet in the bigs.
Last guy we'll touch on and didn't even come close to making the top 50. But I can't really fault you for it at this point. So Clayton Kershaw, let's have the Kershaw discussion.
Oh yeah.
So his NFBC ADP right now is 38.6, but that's not really a fair representation of what's sort of happening since we've had him arrive at Dodgers camp and not be able to throw, which is important for a pitcher.
Very.
So he's gone as low as 78 in NFBC drafts since that happened. In TGFBI, got that out. Was afraid I wasn't. He's gone on average of 50.2.
Yeah.
The worst slot he's been taken is 81st, and that was in our Champions League.
Yeah.
So guys, you might know what they're talking about.
They're champs.
Yeah, I don't know really how to feel. Like I was low on Kershaw last year, and it felt strange.
Yeah, it does feel strange.
And now it just kind of feels like, man, it's been 3 seasons since he's thrown more than 175 innings.
Yeah.
It's crazy because he's only 30.
I know.
But it's sort of like the Miguel Cabrera 30, where it's a lot of miles on that
and you just don't know with some of these pitchers, you just don't know like when and a back too. We're not even talking about a back
injuries.
We're talking about back
scary.
for the past couple of years, and I was with you
back
last
and
year.
shoulder. Those
like
are
back and shoulder. Are you kidding me? And you're right. You mentioned it. I mean, the innings, we all know them, but I mean, 149, 175, 161. His strikeout, his K per 9. I mean, has dropped considerably over the last couple of years. 8.65, swinging strike percentage 15-14, and then 11, contact percentage 70-72, 78, 40 home runs allowed over the last 2 years. Like the ground ball percentage is not the same, slightly more fly balls, and then a back and an arm here to start. So I've never been the one to take Kershaw in the first round. Now I've missed out on some beauty campaigns from him for sure, and I've lucked out on not having to deal with him over the past couple of years, but maybe I'll have him this year if he goes outside the top. Yeah. Maybe I'll have him if he goes outside the top 80 or so, but I just don't think he's a top 15 guy anymore. Like, sure, he has the upside to be it, but I just don't want to, not going to risk my draft with him as he went ahead of Aaron Nola in my draft.
That's pretty crazy.
And I think there's some significant risk in that pick.
Yeah. I mean,
that I'm not willing to spend.
It's funny because it's all about juxtaposition too. Like if we said in a vacuum, someone had a 2.73 ERA with a 3.19 FIP,
walks fewer than 2 per 9.
We'd be like, wow, this guy sounds great. Where can I get him? But because it's Kershaw, maybe there's like a slight overreaction. But I actually think it's really interesting who you paired him with in your rankings. He comes in right with Tyon. And I think that actually when I think about their lines in my mind, like we're all getting crazy about Tyon because he was someone who across, I think it was May 27th, he discovered the slider. And then from that point on, he was amazing. But even in that sort of amazing time frame, it was like a 2.70 ERA, a 3.20 FIP, and about a 24% strikeout rate, which was Kershaw's entire season last year. So, it does speak to maybe, we tend to overreact on the younger pitchers and overreact on the older pitchers and kind of vault them down. But I think they're very, very similar guys. So I think you're right. If that's the tier you can get him in, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I don't think I would want to take him much higher than that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, do we play the game with all the starting pitchers? Like, where do you have him? Like, where would you 25 top 25 guy for you?
Yeah. Still, like I said, I think if
what
I
if he
have
doesn't
Ty
throw
on,
over the next? What if he doesn't throw it all in
that's
spring?
tough. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, if he doesn't throw in spring, that means
Then
we're
we're talking
definitely
about
not going to see him till May.
Then we're talking about like a discounted guy too, as someone who we can get maybe in the fifth.
Yeah.
And you plug in on the DL for a little bit, and you're just like, whoa, well, maybe Kershaw's my second pitcher, and he could be like, again, I've never taken that risk early with the back that's popped up recently, but now I'm kind of like, I'm more inclined, but I'm seeing people like, oh, he's outside my top 30. Like if he's going outside the top 30, like I'm more willing to take a shot on him then.
You had to take a shot at that point. Yeah. And I would say, I mean, one name that sprang to mind just because of, kind of maybe reaching the end of his rope a little bit sooner, a little bit younger than we thought he would. Somebody who lost a ton of fastball velocity. And that's the big thing. His fastball velocity down to 90.9 miles per hour on average last season. Lowest swinging strike rate of his career since 2010. So lows across the board. It reminded me a little bit of Felix Hernandez. And I make this comparison a lot, but I think it's apt because, the Hernandez thing was just so by the book. It was a guy loses his fastball velocity. Suddenly that guy isn't willing to throw his fastball in the strike zone. Now he's nibbling. Now the walks go up. Like Kershaw actually at 46.3%, one of the lowest zone rates of his career. So he's already kind of starting to nibble on the edges because when he throws it in the zone, 36.1% hard contact rate, easily the highest of his career. Teams can hit his fastball. I would say the differentiating factor between those two is where Kershaw can now kind of turn to his slider, and his slider's a great pitch.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And actually, he was throwing his slider more than his fastball by the end of last season. Hernandez's second pitch was a changeup. Yeah. And that so part and parcel works with the fastball that was just a tough road to go. So I still think I believe in Kershaw as a top 20 guy. But yeah, if you're right, if he's not throwing by, maybe mid-March, because we're ideally with a guy like Kershaw,
I don't think he's going to be.
Probably not. Ideally, though, you'd want him to be healthy at the start of the season because you have to figure at some point whether it's actual injury or just Dave Roberts' philosophy on not wanting to overexert pitchers. He's going to miss some starts during the middle of the season anyway. So if you're already lopping off the first month, does he get to is he just Rich Hill now? Yeah. Remember our thing with if Rich Hill could just throw 130 innings, I'd be happy. It's are we having that conversation now with Kershaw?
We may be having the conversation with everybody inside that rotation besides Walker Buehler. Like really, I mean, everybody has it.
I kind of worry about him too. Actually.
And everyone has it. I mean, they all have a ton of upside, but there's some question marks with all of them. So I mean, Kershaw is very interesting. He's obviously dropped. I mean, he was. Even if I did a mock with Fantrax 2 months ago where he was going outside the top 10. So I was like, wow, there's going to be some great value here in Kershaw. And then you hear this news. It's concerning me.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Pat Mayo Experience, talking Chris Meaney's top 50 players for the 2019 season. You can follow all of Chris's work at The Athletic. Want to pump up the draft package a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the draft package is phenomenal. There's so many bright minds way over my head. No, honestly, the info is fantastic. We got everything there, and the information's continuing to pump here as we get into March, and baseball, spring training games are happening. Updates, of course, are following everything. The Athletic rankings are on there, and they're going to be updated consistently. So Nano's on there. Everyone's ripping apart his rankings, having fun with it. Jake's on there, of course. Eno and Melchior, they all have their rankings on there as well. And Funston. So yeah, the draft package it's legit. And if you sign up, you get all the Athletic content. It's not just fantasy baseball, so you get everything.
Fantastic. So if you want to check out Chris's full rankings, make sure to subscribe to The Athletic. And as a thank you for sticking around, forgot to do this off the top, but if you guys want into a draw for 20 DraftKings dollars, what you have to do is first and foremost like this video, then in the comments section below on YouTube, let me know who you think was the biggest omission from Chris's top 50. Who do you think we're going to regret not talking about as a top 50 player heading into the 2019 season? So make sure to do that. Maybe you get yourself 20 DK dollars to use for the upcoming fantasy baseball season on DraftKings. I'm Garion Thorne. Please follow me at Garion Thorne on Twitter. And thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the show. We'll check you later.
Mayo Experience! Experience!